Good morning.
Okay, well, let's get started here. So good morning, everyone, and happy Talk Track Thursday. Today is the first of our three-part bi-weekly series, Live with Larry, where Bird Rock Systems has our very own enterprise solutions architect, Larry Hoehn, sit down and provide technology insights with other technology advocates, along with other members of our team. This high-level series is meant to give you listeners insight from Bird Rock's own engineers, so you have the knowledge to make great decisions for your network and business overall. Without further ado, we are going live with Larry.
Thanks, Ariel. Appreciate it. And thanks for everybody for joining today. I've been looking forward to this webinar all week. It's kind of a different format than you're used to seeing if you've been enjoying a lot of these in the past. So instead of hitting you with a bunch of PowerPoint slides and things along those lines, more of an organic conversation that we're having on a technical level about a few things. And that's what the series is going to be about. But like I said, I've been stoked to be able to talk about this webinar all week. Today's topic is relatively new converged technology that we'll be discussing. I think with more mobile users, data, and the services that take place outside of the protections of the traditional security layers that we have in place, it's really hard to keep up. So you think of the work from home initiatives that have been happening lately, people gone home and, depending on how you're set up, there might be a little bit less security that those users had in the past compared to before. And you're trying to figure out what to do with that. Different technologies were really designed to handle different types of traffic and security threats when you think about it. And for some, the path for adopting multiple solutions is really the direction they've been going to handle those different requirements. But as you know, every product deployed is another, what's a good way to put it, like set of policies that you got to configure, interfaces to manage, and another set of logs that you got to monitor. And then you have more work, more expenses, more complexity, and sometimes unintentional security gaps happen as a result of that as well. But I think there's still hope. So what I did is I asked Jason Morris, he's a senior solution engineer from Planet One, to join us today to have a discussion around SASE. SASE is spelled S-A-S-E. It stands for Secure Access Service Edge, and it's designed to help embrace cloud and mobility by providing network and security services. So it's a converged architecture. And my goal for our time today is to help you understand what an effective secure access service edge is and what it looks like. So with that said, hey, welcome, Jason. How you doing?
Doing fantastic, Larry. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for joining us. Where in the country are you joining us from today?
I'm in Southern California.
Yeah, it's been warm lately, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Thanks for jumping on. So maybe just start off, before we jump into the technology, share with us kind of what got you to this place today. What got you to working with Planet One and this conversation that we're able to have on SASE today?
Yeah, so I actually 23 plus years in the industry. I was at EXO for 18 and then went over to Masergy for 3.5. And in that time, I basically specialized in all things network infrastructure, MPLS, VPLS, you name it. And essentially just got frustrated with the aspect of every time I had to sell a solution, I had to tell my customer, hey, this is the best solution we have. And they'd ask me why I said that. And I said, because it's the only one I can sell you, right? And with that frustration, it really doesn't help when you've got a customer who has a real need for a real solution. So here at Planet One, I have the ability to be that liaison between the customers and the carriers. And basically to be able to vet out the solution, a proper solution for your customers or whatever have you, to make sure at the end of the day they're getting what they're looking for and not just something that they were sold by some sales rep. So that's kind of my focus here, is to basically still specialize in these technologies, be able to kind of basically get them to a spot where you guys understand them fully and how to best position yourself and basically utilize them yourself.
Awesome. Yeah, what a journey. I know you look back at the past, right, and where something like SASE has come from, and it kind of reminds me a lot of, I don't know, when next generation firewalls came out, for example. Prior to that, we used to have separate web application firewalls and secure access gateways, and then the firewall itself, and then IDP, right, for the threat protection and everything. Finally, with the next gen firewalls, those things got combined together And it was a little bit of like, do we really, sometimes it makes sense to combine it and sometimes it didn't. And when does it make sense and when doesn't it? I kind of see that with Sassy too. Can you talk a little bit about what your thoughts are, what's converging there?
Yeah, so if we can real quick, I'm going to just share my screen for a second here. I put together just a couple diagrams I just wanted to show, right? So kind of to go over the evolution. We had this here. Here we go. Just to kind of show, right, the evolution of what we had before. And as you said, right, so, here's a distributed model where, customers had their firewalls and they had a firewall at every single location. And that was to protect every single user sitting behind that firewall. And that made sense back then to do that. It was extremely expensive to do, simply because, again, you had to actually have a firewall at every single site, and that was to make sure that that employer had every single employee, every user protected. And then what we saw was it just went from that to basically going to this centralized model where, well, what if we just have a firewall at one spot and then have several locations, all what we call backhaul all their internet traffic to that firewall, right? To actually go out the firewall, again, to stay protected, and all users can stay protected. But again, this didn't really help in the sense of, geographically where all these users are. If there really was a user in New York who needed internet and had to go all the way back to LA, it just didn't make sense. And then as you were talking about at-home users, right? And so all these at-home users, well, they had to typically go into or VPN or IPsec into, say, an access concentrator or a firewall at one of these locations to get onto the network, and again, to be able to get to all the resources. And so you can see where all these were frustrations back then. And what Sassy has kind of done is we push things. You've seen providers who have, before Sassy came out, it's been out for about, I'd say, a year and a half now, but you saw providers providing what they would call cloud firewall. And so literally what it was is just actually not having any firewalls on-prem and then forcing all that traffic to a edge device on the provider's edge, right, as a firewall, to get all those sites basically still protected and running all that traffic through that actual firewall itself. Users then who had to get to cloud apps and stuff, right? How did they get to those cloud apps? Well, again, they had to, depending on if they were working from home or if they were, on site, they would be forced to that cloud firewall, and then from there authenticated and then allowed to certain resources, whether they're cloud apps or going out to the internet. And the other thing is just mobile users, right? So mobile users were another big thing. They're downloading constantly apps and stuff like that. How do you control, as an employer, how do you control what they have on their mobile devices when they're on your network, right? And so Sassy came out, and the evolution that we see is that what Sassy has done is they've literally pushed all that protection to the edge. So regardless if you're sitting on site here at a location, if you're a mobile user out there, say at a Starbucks, or even just a laptop user at home, what you're seeing is this push to actually get all that traffic out to basically edge appliances, that Sassy provider, so that they can take that and they can do things such as authenticate that user, get them on the network quickly to access any resources with that network. Also apply all those firewall policies that we were talking about, IDS and IPS as well. So it's kind of where the evolution is, hey, regardless of where you go in the world, it doesn't matter. We've got you protected. That user can actually get up out of the office and head out to a Starbucks and still be protected no matter what. And that employer has peace of mind knowing that they're always protected regardless of where they go.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks. That's a good point. And I think that, really we're talking about the convergence of the firewall, security with IT. It's almost like we're combining the security and routing, for the most part together, on a big scale. And I've seen what you're talking about. There's been times where inadvertently, it's not on purpose that it would have been set up this way, but with the current technology set, it's not uncommon to see, like you said, some of that traffic from a far region, hairpinning all the way back to their data center and then back out to the internet, and the latency that causes is really bad, especially when it's coming from like India to New York and back, for example. It's crazy and then, there's issues that they end up having with just from a performance perspective, not even talking about the security side of it.
Yeah, and I'd say with that, right? So in this diagram here, that's a perfect example. So we've got a Dallas user, and so he's hard coded his VPN client on his laptop knows to come back to the Dallas POP, right? And so that's where he's authenticated. He gets to go onto the network. He's got access to all the resources that he needs. He can go out over the internet. But what happens if this user, right, decides to go ahead and, basically hop on a plane and go to London? Well, now that same laptop user has to home still all the way back to Dallas. It's hard coded. Whereas with Sassy, basically they use, it's called an Anycast IP. And that IP just says, look, no matter where I am in the world, I'm going to home back to that Sassy provider's nearest POP so that I can make sure that I get onto the network as quickly as possible. And maybe it is a London POP, right, that user now is going to access rather than, like you said, having to backhaul all the way back to Dallas and add all that latency. We're looking to, Sassy providers are looking to make sure that every end user has the best performance and experience when they're on the network.
Yeah. Hey, and I just want to throw out there too, for those that are listening right now, if you do have any questions, make sure and put them into the chat box so that way Ariel can bring them up to us here, and we'll be more than happy to talk about them as we're going through this. So Ariel, I don't know if there are any questions yet, but if you guys have any questions, just start filling that up and we can go to a different page or maybe whiteboard something up different here, just so you know. Has there been anything yet, Ariel?
Nothing yet, but you're good to go.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so yeah, I think what I like with the design of the Sassy is, like I talked about earlier, for people working from home especially, it just seems like such a great use case. Yeah, we're saying, hey, go home, hop onto your Cox connection or whatever it is that you have at home, and still be able to do all the work that they were doing. Sometimes they don't even need to VPN into the corporate office because they might have gone to a lot of SaaS-related services where they have their stuff out there on Box. Customers may have things where they're using O365 and a lot of other things that may not require that they go through a headquarters and all the security that's there to take in place. So it's kind of like still being able to provide your data leak protection, threat protections, and stuff like that to people that are already out there on the cloud, right, Jason?
Yeah, and it's interesting. So one of the worries and concerns that most of the employers that I've talked to, right, is sending their employees home with a laptop device, mobile device, whatever have you, and that's company owned. And how do you guarantee when that user goes home that they remember to log on to that VPN every single time so that they can access those resources? As you said, what if they're literally just going to a SaaS application that doesn't require them to actually be authenticated onto the network and actually, be in that same network with from where corporate's at? That doesn't necessarily happen all the time. So one of the concerns is how do I make sure that my users, regardless, because that's a company issued laptop, how do I make sure that the moment that user flips on and logs onto that laptop, that they're automatically protected even in their own home? Because we know at-home users don't typically have firewalls sitting there at home. So how is that user, if they were to just literally fire up the laptop and go out over the internet, how do we know they're protected and that they're not downloading malware or whatever have you to that actual device? Because again, they forgot to actually VPN to the network first before they started surfing the internet. So that's a big thing for Sassy is these devices can be locked down to the point to where it doesn't matter every time that user logs into that laptop, that tablet, whatever it is, that the moment that they do, that they are absolutely already logged in and VPN'd in, so they don't even have to think about it, and they're always 100% protected.
Can you talk a little bit, one of the areas I think is a lot different, right? When you're going to this kind of a model potentially, let's say that most of our firewalls were from the first diagram that you had where everything is on-prem, and we're looking at going with this kind of a model through Sassy. The management of the firewall is going to be a little bit different, because you're kind of using a cloud-based tool typically in order to manage it. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so the frustration for especially whoever handles the security at each of these, every single customer, how are they handling that? Well, when we, as you said, Larry, when we go back to the distributed model where every single site had to have its own firewall, typically your IT guys had to go in and log into individually to every single firewall to set those policies. Not only that, but what they were doing was they were actually setting policies, basically a summarized policy. So saying, hey, every user here, they're this network, they're allowed to go to these resources, they're not allowed to go to these, content filtering or whatever have you. But it was typically based on the office itself as a group of just one solid group. So where Sassy is a little different is what you can do is you can actually go in Two, as you said, this actual portal, that it's one portal, you go in one pane of glass, you can actually go in and set policies that are actually going to protect your entire network. And that's every single location, all in one change, right? Rather than having to go to each physical device to do that. But also on top of that, Sassy gives you that granularity to actually, for every single user. So I can actually go in to that portal and set policies for every single granular user. I can use it. I can do groups if I want to. I could do it as a whole. Hey, the policy set for everybody. Or I could do a group of people. So this group, I need marketing to have access to things like Facebook and social media, LinkedIn and whatnot, but I don't want anyone else to. You can actually set those policies as groups, but you can also go down to the granular level of every single individual user. You can set policies, and that's all in one pane of glass sitting there in the portal, rather than, again, having to go to individual on-prem firewalls to make those changes.
Yeah, and it goes beyond that too, I think, right? It's like the thing that's cool by having that single portal that you can go to, it's not only for all the firewalls and managing the security policies, you're also able to tie it in with all the other, like you said, it could tie in with Active Directory or what other two-factor methods and stuff like that they were using before. So you're still getting all that functionality. Plus through that portal, you're able to manage like your software-defined WAN, for instance, and some of those other things that wouldn't necessarily traditionally be part of the same portal that you'd be using to manage everything.
Yeah, I would say, so another part, and you bring up a good point, is the visibility into the network. So, several times I'll talk to customers and they'll say, I said, what kind of size circuits do you need? And well, I think I need, and they'll throw out some number, and this is the size that each one should be. And I'll ask them, what are you basing that off of? And they say, well, because this is what we had prior. And every single time things got slower and our performance degraded, we just threw more bandwidth at it. And so what we're also seeing is, in the SD-WAN space, along with Sassy, is network visibility to actually be able to see those data flows, right? And be able to see the network flows and what you're actually using on the network. And that's important because, again, regardless if you've got your users sitting behind a firewall on-prem, or if you have them at home, having them have to actually route through that edge appliance that actually then can see, it not only regulates what it is that they're able to access, but it's also letting you know, here's your entire network visibility. This is all the data flows, and this is what they look like. And I can't tell you how many customers come back to me and say, I cannot believe how much bandwidth is just being utilized for Hulu or YouTube or Facebook or whatever it is. And it's empowering them by giving them that network visibility on the network at all times as well.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things that's cool too that I've seen happening is so far, for the most part, I mean, they're in this process right now where that industry is growing and getting better and better. Where one of the other folds that I'm seeing going in there is more on the CASB side of things too. So even if you want to control or you need to, from a business perspective, you want to control the sites that people are going to, but sometimes you want them to go to a site, but make sure that they're not transmitting corporate data from that site to their personal version of that site, so they're not taking the data that was for their a corporate box account and moving it into their personal box account, for instance, or emailing it out. And right now I feel that the industry is at a point where there's like a light version of that's already built in, which is kind of cool. And I would foresee that it kind of ends up even enhancing further.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. So a couple of things, right? So we've got users today who are constantly downloading apps onto, again, mobile devices, whether that's company issued or their own device. And how do we protect the network against some of those apps that, as we see today, right? We're hearing about TikTok being a bad app, and so it may just be banned. But what if you've got users who have that, and now that's on your network? How do you regulate that? And that CASB function sits in between and can actually regulate what applications can be downloaded, which ones cannot. But also, as you said, let's say you've got an actual employee who, basically you've had to let him go, and you've given him 2 weeks, and now that rogue employee is not too happy, right, disgruntled, and now they're trying to download sensitive information from certain applications, whatever have you. That CASB sits in the middle again and regulates what can come down to that device and what cannot. And sometimes it's just sensing that this user typically doesn't download this much information at any given time. What's going on, right? So the CASB function sits in there. And again, it really protects those mobile users, laptop users, whatever have you, no matter where they're at. But from the aspect of it's really the employer who's being protected as well.
Yeah. Cool, very cool. Well, one of the things that that I've been seeing as far as use cases go for this, you mentioned plenty of them already, but more specifically, in addition to what's been going on with people working from home, one of the other big pushes that I've been seeing for people that are interested in this technology has been along the lines of aging hardware. So they might have some legacy firewall that they've had in place. It's been working really good for a long time, but now they can't get support on it pretty soon anymore because of the just the age of this device. So they're at a point now where they're considering replacing that equipment. And in many cases, they're really interested in looking at this technology because it's like, oh, cool, we can kind of push the firewall from where it is today to the other side of the pipe, for example. And so that's one use case I've seen. What other ones are you seeing out there?
Well, now I'd like to say, so you're absolutely right. And that's a big one, right? Is we're seeing not only if it's just outdated equipment, because I kind of look back to the days of when SIP first came out. Everyone wanted it. They didn't know why, and so they ran out and they bought these SIP PBXs, right? And spent $40,000 to $60,000 on this appliance. And before they even got it out of the box, it was already outdated. So you're looking at outdated equipment. That's exactly that's a perfect that's a perfect segue into just saying that the other thing that we can look at also is what about the licensing? So licensing on those devices, those firewalls. All right, the equipment can still sustain itself and whatnot. But what about when it comes up for license renewal? That's where I'm seeing a lot of the push is we've got customers saying, well, wait a minute, you're telling me that you can actually provide me all the security, whether, firewall and antivirus and IDS and IPS and all that, and you can provide that to me in the cloud, protect my users no matter where they go for a nominal monthly cost, rather than me spend all this money just to renew licenses on, like you said, outdated equipment. That's a big push. A lot of customers today. And also what I'm seeing is customers want to go ahead and start to actually integrate or combine appliances all into one. They're trying to save on space and power and whatnot. So, if I can take an SD-WAN appliance and somehow integrate in a firewall functionality into that as well, and then for my at-home users, use that Sassy type of effect application there on the edge, again, I'm saving on space, and I'm starting to integrate more and more of all the actual devices I need into one solid box.
What's the rollout typically look like? So it's like, hey, I want to go with something like this. I know there's a lot of things. So it's like when you think of hardware, the software maintenance that you're talking about, when those things expire, when the circuits or contracts are about to expire and stuff like that. So what do you typically see as a general game plan for rolling this out?
Yeah, so depending on the network. So customers who turn around and they say, look, I want to still utilize, MPLS. If they're looking to a provider to provide that, how that typically goes 60 to 90 days, depending on the area and if the site's on net or off net or whatever. So circuits are always going to be, a factor in this, whether they're internet circuits or MPLS circuits. Where I see this really saves on time is with customers who have, say, existing internet circuits today, and their concern is to get onto the network as quickly as possible. And I've seen some of these SASE/SD-WAN providers who can ship out boxes within days and literally plug in those internet connections. Again, access that one pane of glass, that portal to go in and actually just bring those sites up onto the network quickly. And then those at-home users, it's literally as easy as downloading a VPN client, right? You go to the SASE provider's website. Hey, I need the client. Download it, and within minutes you're on the network. So you're talking about taking where typically 60 to 90 days to overhaul an entire network to just being able to utilize internet circuits, plug them into an SD-WAN appliance, and then also take advantage of that SASE, the SASE applications and whatnot from the at-home users or mobile users as well.
Yeah, and that 60 to 90 days you're talking about, again, that's typical. You can do it very rapidly from what I've seen too. So if everything was already at a point where it's just like, I want to cut this over ASAP, that's pretty quick to do, right?
Absolutely. And it's great. The difference here is that if you're utilizing just internet circuits and plugging all this in, the providers they're carrier agnostic when it comes to whatever access you're utilizing at every single location. It doesn't matter who the ISP is, because literally these boxes or these clients know to home back to that SASE's backbone per se to actually get onto the network. So it's very rapid. I mean, you're talking deployments within 5 to 7 days, where you truly need it.
Yeah, one thing too that's kind of interesting is that what I've noticed is that if a customer is set up to have their environment where their VPN connection they have to the corporate office is split tunneling, so they're allowing their users to be able to go to the internet directly already before, and they only have to go the VPN tunnel currently when they need to hit corporate resources. What's interesting is as we move over to this, like with a lot of technology, all of a sudden there's more visibility that we were getting for a lot of that traffic before, which is kind of interesting. So now we're able to have a lot more control on those things. But then what ends up happening, I've seen, is that there's almost like a multi-prong approach that starts to happen. So as the rollout's happening from maybe the network team, for example, and working on moving things over from a routing perspective and using the new service, the security team starts jumping in pretty quick and looking at their reports and maybe making some adjustments to the procedures or policies they had. Have you seen that too?
Yeah, I have, and you bring up a great point about the at-home users, and that's a big deal, right? So we go back to this diagram here, this one right here. So the typical at-home user, right, before SASE, this is what they did, right? They would log in, and they would have to actually, so like you said, they could split tunnel. So, hey, I'm literally just VPNing over to this LA office. I'm sitting in Dallas to this LA firewall. I'm VPNing into the actual network only to access private or, the actual resources that I need on the network, right? But if I'm just going to go out over the internet, well, then I'm not going back to the site to do that. I'm just going out my own internet connection. Why is that an issue? Because now that user is out over the internet and could be downloading things they shouldn't be doing, right? And so how do we control that? Well, we can say, well, I'm going to force all the traffic back to this actual site, even if it's internet. And then, of course, they're backed by this actual firewall. They're protected by the firewall itself. And that's great. But again, what kind of performance are you going to get when you're having a Dallas laptop user have to home all the way back to LA? It doesn't make sense. So when you're looking at SASE providers who say, again, look, wherever that laptop is, get them as quickly to our backbone. And from there, they don't need to go back to LA to actually go out their firewall or whatever have you. Right here at this pop right here, we're already authenticating them. We're making sure they're allowed on the network. We're allowing them on the network then, but we're also regulating anywhere they're going over the internet and protecting them. And that's where that firewall functionality sits. It's sitting now on the edge. So it doesn't matter. And we're not looking at it. And now security guys, right, that they're looking at it from this aspect of, again, I can set all that on the edge. It's one pane of glass. I want to configure and set up those policies. But now I'm not forcing all my users to go back to one solid firewall on-prem somewhere. It's just, let's get you as quickly to that SASE provider's network, get you protected as quickly as possible so that, again, those at-home users are still experienced. We know we're doing it. We're sitting here today, right? Sitting here on a WebEx or whatever have you, and we've got our cameras on and everything else. And this is using home internet. How do we better, basically utilize what we have today and still have the functionality of looking like we're still sitting in the office?
Yeah. It's just not feasible to have to send a bunch of little firewalls out to everybody's houses, right?
Exactly. Yep, exactly.
All right. Any other use cases that come to mind that you wanted to touch base on?
Yeah, I mean, just a lot of the use cases that we're seeing, it is customers who do have, multiple boxes for solutions they're trying to actually implement. SD-WAN is a huge thing right now. So everyone's kind of looking at how do I include SD-WAN in with my security offering? And again, we've seen with COVID-19, this push to work from home. I'm a little fearful of all my users now. What are they doing? What are they looking at? These are my laptops. We're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of where we've got, IT infrastructure is starting to dwindle. And how do we've got customers saying, how do I get someone or maybe a provider to help manage that for me? So you've got a lot of these SASE providers that allow co-managing. So, hey, you've got a very small IT team. We can work with them and help them, right, to actually put, set up your security posture, make sure it's all implemented. And then again, if you're ever stuck, you can come to us, you fill out a ticket, we make those changes for you. But I'm seeing a lot of that push is, again, it's the work from home initiative that's really big right now. I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon. So even when this COVID-19 stuff goes by the wayside, what I see is employers today are saying, why would I spend all this money on a monthly rent at an office when my employees have been able to do their job for, say, 6 months to a year already? How do I keep everything in place that way? And again, save on money, right? So saving on dollars as well is a huge thing right now. And as you can see, if I'm not spending the money on actual physical equipment that is outdated and I'm selling it on eBay 3 to 6 years down the line, and I'm not spending the money on renewing licenses and whatnot, and I'm just spending a nominal fee to actually have a monthly fee to have an actual provider do all that for me, that's just what I'm seeing out there today in the market.
Yeah, I'm hearing the same thing from a standpoint of are the remote offices really, is that real estate even needed anymore? So this ties in really well with that as leases start to expire. If anything, what I'm hearing is that the customers are planning to increase headcount because productivity has gotten better and they want to be able to expand the business even further, but they want to do that from the capacity of people working from home, or maybe small offices in some cases. It just seems like the huge remote offices is one of those things that may start tapering off, it seems like.
Yeah, and don't forget the network visibility. So I still have the ability to actually see exactly what my at-home users, those employees that are at home, I can see every single thing that they are doing on a daily basis in the sense of every application they're accessing, even to the granularity of internet sites and whatever have you. So some employers are very concerned about that. It makes sense. And to have that network visibility to see data flows from a single granular user or even an office. What is that office utilizing? That 10 meg circuit, how much of that bandwidth is literally being utilized for voice? How much of it is for video? And how much of it is for, streaming cat videos on YouTube or whatever have you? Those are huge things, right? And those are a big concern for customers to be able to have that security functionality, be able to literally deploy your end users to their homes almost instantaneously. Just, hey, download a client and you're back onto the network as well. That right there. And then again, just the network functionality that you can see with all that. It's just, it's a no-brainer to literally, kind of move in that direction.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Ariel, any questions from the audience?
Yeah, I did have some sent to me privately, so let me just go over one of them.
Are you allowed to share them? Is it private or can you share them?
No, they just sent it to me privately since I'm the host, so I'll just share it out loud. How do mobile users connect to the Sassy?
So the mobile users, the way it works is they would do the same thing. They would download a client so it's like an app that they would download onto their phone. So what would happen is that every time that they went to go access or they needed to access the network, whether, it's Office 365 or whatever have you, the moment they do that, that actual client on the actual mobile device literally knows it has to route that traffic to the SASE provider's edge appliance to then get onto the network. So it's like a VPN client that you would have on your laptop, actually.
Yeah, and with most of the modern VPN clients, one thing I like is the same thing on the SASE side is that that agent is there in order to be able to give you even more context from a policy perspective with what you want to do when that user connects to the VPN. So it might look at a little bit of a posture kind of thing on the device that's trying to connect in. You can, depending on the solution that you go with, it could make sure that that device wasn't jailbroken or whatnot, as an example, or that it's up to date on its patches. And there's different ways too, I think, that agent works. Sometimes it's a IPsec tunnel that fires up. Sometimes it could be a proxy kind of thing that it's doing. So there's a little bit of differences depending on the solution, right?
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out, so not every SASE provider is we'll say a true SASE provider. So there are different flavors. So as we talk about SASE providers out there that actually, you are homing back to their actual backbone. It's those edge appliances that are looking at authenticating the user and, injecting them onto the network, allowing access to resources and protecting them from the internet and whatnot. And then there's other SASE providers who don't actually have their own backbone. So literally all they're doing is all the functionality is on that client, whether it's in the app of the actual phone or that VPN client on their laptop. So all the firewall. So again, literally, as you were saying earlier, rather than saying, well, I'm going to ship out a firewall at every single of these at-home user sites, that client does it. So it's on the laptop. So the functionality of that firewall and everything is just happening within the laptop itself. So again, it all depends on what do those data flows need to look like? Where are the applications that those users are trying to access? Is it extremely important that they have an actual private backbone that they home back to? Or can it just be a client? So there's different flavors of the actual SASE. Some are literally, like I said, the edge appliances are handling that for the customer, and then others we're actually downloading these clients onto your laptop, and that's where we're enforcing. Or in other sites, like Versa they're starting to do it, where we can ship out the boxes as well to those corporate sites or physical locations, so that you can do it that way. And then any at-home users, we have a VPN client that basically takes care of all that. So there's different angles at how to do it, and typically it's just what's the need, what does that design look like, and how do we best put that solution together?
Yeah, absolutely. What else did you have, Ariel?
This one just came in. Does the SASE model replace some of the WAN functionality, such as replacing VPN at sites where traffic is currently being backhauled, or is it more for remote users?
Yeah, so no, that's so good question. So that's for everybody. So it's and that's the great thing about it in basically putting and in integrating it in with SD-WAN as well. All that WAN functionality, again, if I'm just plugging in internet circuits and then I'm regulating on the core or on the backbone where that traffic is to flow, or that user, again, rather than backhauling that internet traffic all the way back to one specific site to hairpin out of there, if I can just get that user to the SASE provider's nearest POP entrance level, right, the ingress onto their actual backbone, and enforce those policies there. And a lot of these SASE providers are global, so they're anywhere and everywhere. So it's just a matter of getting your users home back as quickly, the on-ramp onto the backbone, and being able to actually access all those SASE resources. And then all the physical locations, again, it's just utilizing those internet circuits, applying the policies. And typically those appliances, the SD-WAN appliances, are prefing traffic over one transport over another. You've got failover and whatever have you, maybe load balancing, but then also being able to take advantage on the core of those security features and functionality as well, right? Because it's not just at-home users. We're also looking at those physical sites. What's great about it is, let's take that at-home user, right? And I'm, here and I'm working at home, and all of a sudden, hey, we're back in the office now, and I take this laptop, I go in. Well, when I fire up that laptop, the VPN client sees, oh, wait a minute, you're sitting behind this appliance here. You're at corporate, or you're on site at a location, a physical location. I'm not going to engage that VPN client right now. I'm going to leave it off because you're already protected by the appliance that's sitting there on site. So it's intelligent enough to know whenever I'm at home, or whenever I'm maybe again at Starbucks or whatever have you, fire up that VPN client. But hey, whenever I'm on site at a physical location, keep that VPN down, and I'll just utilize the resources there and be able to access the network that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's little by little that it can happen. I think that's the moral of the story, and why, when we were talking about timeframes earlier, how long that usually takes to deploy overall, because you do it at a sweet spot where certain circuits are going to be expiring anyway, for example, but it can certainly work with the existing infrastructure that's in place. If for some reason you needed to leave the old circuits in place or whatever, it ends up leveraging with the current technology. The thing I would compare it to, well, like you said, Jason, it's kind of like load balancing. It's kind of like policy-based forwarding. It's a little bit of all that stuff to be able to route the traffic the way it needs to go.
Yep, absolutely. I don't want to use a DIA connector, a dedicated internet access that's got 10 megs, and then an LTE connection. I don't want to load balance that per se, right? I want to set policies that say I'm going to utilize all that traffic, or send all that traffic out that primary transport, because that's my preferred transport, with failover to that LTE if I ever needed to. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Every single situation is different. It's never a one size fits all. In some locations, I may have 50 users at this one location that I need, maybe MPLS and internet, DIA. But another side, I may need one DIA and a broadband connection. And then another side, I may need just a broadband connection with an LTE connection. So again, it all depends on the locations, how many users are there. So it's just kind of piecing everything together. And that's what makes it so flexible, right? Is to be able to actually, provide those different transports depending on the need at each location.
Cool. Anything else, Ariel?
Nice. Yeah. We do have a couple other ones that came in. Can the SASE provide logs?
Yes. Absolutely. Yes, that's another big one. I'm glad they brought that up. Yes, actually, so logs so depending also on the SASE provider, some SASE providers are also, they will monitor those logs, or they will send them to whoever, right, the customer themselves, if they've got a security team that's, that can do that and look at those logs. A lot of times what you'll see in those logs is there's a lot of commotion going on, right? So there are all these events. And so what these asset providers are doing is they're implementing their own security teams or SOC services to say, look, we'll take a look at that traffic. And there's a lot of commotion going on. The logs are just, this thick, right? And as they're looking through them, they take all that commotion, all the noise, and they condense it down to maybe a few isolated incidents. And then they can reach out to the customer and say, hey, here's actual true incidents. Here's how you mitigate that. Or in some aspects, they're actually doing a managed detection and response. So where they're actually seeing those events happen, and they can shut down, they can detect what user is affected, shut down or isolate or quarantine that actual appliance, and then reach out to the customer and say, what do you want to do from here? So some of the SASE providers they'll just provide you logs, and here you go. You're absolutely, you've got it all there. If you've got a team, but we will also take those logs. We'll take a look at them. We'll actually monitor all your sites, and we will act on your behalf if you want. It all depends on how far the customer really wants to go down that path of security. Because if we think about it, right, a lot of customers will ask them today, who's doing your security today? And they may have a person on staff. Typically, it's one or two people, and they work 8 to 5 on Monday, or 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. But we know that thieves don't take the nights or weekends off. So who's watching your network at those other times? So there's, again, just a different level of support depending on what the customer's looking for.
I think potentially too, it's less logs to have to look at. If anything, it's very thorough. I've seen it's like, you're able to see what's going on with the clients, for instance, that are connecting in. A lot of detail that you see there. You're able to see what's going on with all the network connectivity, like you said. You're able to see on top of that, which is kind of cool, what's going on the connectivity side of things. So it's like you're seeing the bandwidth part of it together with all these different aspects. So you don't have to go back to your internet router logs or your MPLS providers logs or something like that to try to help diagnose what's going on. In many cases, it's all in one spot. And like you said, I think there's that variable assistance, right, that you can get where it sort of makes sense, where sometimes at the very minimum that I've seen, when something, like you said, abnormal comes up, there's going to be at least an alert that you can receive through an email to let you know something's going on, something strange is happening could just be like a bandwidth utilization perspective or something that's abnormal.
Yeah, and so some of these providers, what they're doing is they're using artificial intelligence and machine learning. So what they'll do is they'll plug in these boxes, and they start monitoring the network, and it's just literally it's setting a baseline. So maybe the first 2 to 3 to 4 weeks, all right, we see the typical data flows at every single location, at home users, whatever have you. And then what these boxes do with machine learning and that artificial intelligence is they're able to look at anomalies, things. You know what? I typically don't see traffic coming from China. This is a little odd. Hey, this user over here, again, they're downloading a lot of several files or whatever have you, and they typically don't do that. So what these boxes are doing is they're looking for those anomalies. So as you said, Larry, it's cutting out all the noise and understanding that this is all typical data flows, right? And then all of a sudden, when an anomaly pops out, that's when these boxes know to alert. So that's another thing it's a huge thing out there right now as well.
Anything else, Ariel?
I do have another question. How would SASE affect the performance of our mission critical applications? Would it make it better, worse, or same?
Yes. So depending on what you're looking to do. So if you've got very sensitive critical apps that you have, typically we know today that we use MPLS, right? So because we want that private connection, also we've got class of service, right? So we want to attach those class of service tags onto those applications, and then traffic shape. What traffic gets to leave my location before other traffic? So I know that my voice and video need to be prioritized. Internet traffic is more of a best effort, right? So being able to actually apply those class of service tags and have those honored on an MPLS network, that makes sense today. But what we're seeing is we're pushing to this now more of a, hey, we just want to use internet circuits, SD-WAN, SASE, whatever have you. How can we get that same feel? And so in certain providers, as I was saying, some have their own backbones. So the difference here is that I don't necessarily need an MPLS connection to utilize. I can actually use an internet connection, and we're building IPsec tunnels, right? again, if you think about it, before it was just box to box, tunnel to tunnel. But what these now SASE providers are doing is they're saying that on-site, on-prem box that's sitting there, it's building a tunnel just back to that SASE provider's edge appliance or their edge device or their POP. And so what happens is so you've got that quick hop over the internet, and once it's over the internet, over that public connection, once it ingresses into that POP, they inject that traffic onto their private backbone. So now what you're getting to see is, and those class of service tags are then honored again, and now it's on this private, say, MPLS backbone. So just like before, where you were using MPLS connections everywhere, I can use internet connections today, do a short IPsec tunnel hop, one hop over to the provider's actual backbone, hop on there, get injected back, and still be able to, basically ride that MPLS connection, that carpool lane type feel, right, with the class of service tags being honored. So it benefits, because with this now I can still, classify my traffic. Whereas again, if I'm just doing internet connections everywhere, I don't have the ability to do that, because you're just over a layer 3 network at that point.
Yeah. That the other part that we keep kind of, I think, touching base on a little bit, we're scratching the surface on, is that one of the other converged technologies that's part of this type of a solution is like WAN. It's WAN optimization, essentially. And it's like, one thing that's really cool with WAN optimization is that they've made some of the issues, the faults, the shortcomings that network technology, Ethernet and TCP/IP have, by increasing performance, if anything, because those retries that normally would need to happen back all the way from the home office, passing that traffic back to the user, comes from your local POP, essentially, that you're connecting in from. So they're caching that information a lot more locally. And if it's not, then you still end up having to pull that back. One use case that I've seen so far that was not good, necessarily potentially for this, is that customer has a dedicated circuit that goes across town. So they have a data center on one side of town, another data center on another side, private circuit connecting the two in between, and they're doing synchronous replication across it, for example. And you just got to test this out. You have to test it out and see if you get the performance that you're really looking for, if it can guarantee what you need to have to still permit something like that. So asynchronous replication, no problem, because that's not real time. But synchronous replication ends up being a problem, because until that write happens at the destination, until you can get that write to that block on that other drive, at the destination, your database is held up in production. So you want that to be as fast as possible typically. A lot of times you just do it within the same data center, but sometimes you do it across town as well. And that's when we kind of got to be careful with this one.
Yeah, that's when you get into, BGP, right? And using that actually routing protocol to advertise where, this site's got, access to those same resources in this site as well. And you get into that, but you're absolutely right, Larry. You're correct, for sure.
What type of firewall does Planet One use?
So Planet One is on the Cato network. So when I got here and I came aboard, I actually sat down with a lot of the SD-WAN providers. And basically, because I've got specialties in working with, when I was at Masergy, Silver Peak, and Fortinet. So I went to a lot of the providers to just kind of see how everyone else is doing it. And Cato came in and had a discussion with us. And I was absolutely amazed at how quickly I could plug that box in. I configured it myself. I had our Costa Mesa office up, I want to say, within a half hour. And then our Scottsdale office, they had several more users, probably 20 some odd users. And I had to implement in a couple other appliances, wireless access points and whatnot. So there, I think I had that site up and running within an hour. And basically I take control of the network. So I've got access to the portal and I'm in there applying any policies and changing, and I can see the health of the circuits also, right? So I can see if a circuit goes down, I get notifications if any of the transports go down. Basically all the data flow statistics and whatnot. So that's what we're using is Cato 100%.
There's a lot of adding to that. I know that it feels like there's not only all the main firewall providers primarily are offering this service now, right? There's just about all of them, not quite all of them yet that I've seen. So, some of the other big name brands that you're used to using probably at your HQs today, all the firewalls that you've deployed probably has a solution that's SASE ready, so to speak, some cloud-based firewall. And then on top of it, there's even other companies like Cato that you're talking about and stuff that just started that way. They just started in the cloud. They don't really, although they have an on-prem component that you need to install, that goes with it, they weren't really built to be, that on-prem data center firewall, right?
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's important, again, as we talked about the different scenarios in Sassy, because you are going to have some of those firewall providers who, again, everyone's running out there because, of course, Sassy's the flavor of the day. And so they're running out there trying to say, look, we do Sassy. And okay, do you really, or is it all a cloud type firewall? Or is it, again, as we talked about, do you have your own virtual backbone? And again, like Cato, they have their own private backbone. Everything's on the edge. It's all regulated from there. Whereas certain other providers or firewall vendors are going to turn around and say, well, what we're doing is just basically, again, we give you those on-prem type fields. Maybe we've got a couple data centers where we'll home all that traffic, right? But again, you've got to hairpin out those selective data centers. Well, if they don't have a huge pop density, that may not make sense to me if I'm, global. I've got 500 sites or, 200, 300 sites or whatever have you. It may not make sense to go through, hairpin out 7 or 8 data centers because that's all they have, and then be reliant on just a VPN client sitting within my laptop users who, are either traveling or working from home, and just basically relying on that actual VPN client to do all the firewall and securing policies that I would typically look at that cloud firewall or that SASE actual, edge appliance doing that. So again, it's kind of stepping back. Everyone wants to do it and everyone says they can do it. What we're trying to look for is we don't want that wristwatch salesman mentality like, hey, I've got a black one and a white one, pick one because this is all I can give you. Let's really look down to the nitty gritty. What are you trying to accomplish? What's the best solution for you? And then basically just putting that all together to make sure it achieves the goals that you guys are trying to do.
Nice. Thanks, Jason. Okay, let's do one last question. Someone said, I am having problems with remote user laptops not being able to reach our domain controller and the inability to patch those remote devices. Would this solution solve that problem?
Yeah, so you can, 2 things, right? So number one, you can actually, a lot of these SASE providers, they'll say, hey, look, if you've got your own AD server sitting wherever have you, we know when those laptops come in, we're going to see those, and we know to send that traffic immediately over, right, and send that traffic to your AD server so that you can authenticate them. But more importantly, what a lot of these SASE providers are doing today is they're saying you can get rid of that portion of it. We'll authenticate on the edge. So literally, again, I don't care where your laptop user or your mobile user is. When they fire up to the network, they're going to come to me first. They're going to ingress or on-ramp on to my backbone. I'm going to see them. And by these policies that we've set and everything, I can authenticate that. It's zero trust model. I'm going to authenticate that user immediately before they even get onto the network. So you can either do it 2 ways. And again, I think it's that kind of control that some IT guys want. Hey, I want to control that AD server or whatever have you. But when you see the simplification of being able to go in and apply that to allowing a SASE provider to do that on the edge, again, it's just getting rid of those appliances that you don't need and letting someone else manage and take care of all that for you.
One of the issues I've been seeing too, since we're doing the work from home thing in some people's cases, is that, and this ties into the question that Active Directory specifically, is that user will be at home, password aging policy kicks in. They need to change their password, but they're not even, because of the way that the architecture is put together, they're mainly hitting cloud-based applications, and there's no AD server in the equation really anymore. But the PC was joined to the domain at one time, so it knows it needs to change password, and things like that end up being kind of tricky. Where having this in place and you have the connectivity squared away through it certainly would be able to help in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Having that on-ramp. Yep, having that on-ramp right there and authenticated to all whatever it is. If it's those cloud apps, then we know to route you to those cloud apps from the ingress of here. Or if it's actual resources back at a data center or a corporate, whatever have you, we authenticate you immediately and then give you the access that you're allowed because the policy is set per user, right? And so being able to do that, it just simplifies everything. Absolutely.
You cutting us off, Ariel? No more questions?
I think you guys are the experts. Do you have any last things that you want to share about SASE?
Weathery.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just excited to see in general where the industry is going to be going. I'm pretty intrigued when these new convergences come into place and make our jobs easier in general. There's going to be a lot more functionality, I think, that are going to continue to add to it as well. Just like we're seeing with all old technology, the legacy stuff that's already in place, it's going to get better and better as we go. And as organizations end up moving more to the cloud, as we're working more from home, this just ends up seeing that it just works lock in step to those kinds of initiatives.
Yeah, Larry, I agree with you. And I would say with that, because you're right, the features and functionality are only going to get better as we move along. Being that Sassy's in its early stages, you're going to see more and more providers coming out and wanting to provide all the same features and functionality. You're going to get to a spot to where everyone's kind of basically providing the same flavor per se. And there's really, again, there's two flavors. There's that virtual backbone or that private backbone feel. And then there's just, basically box to box, client to client. But what I would say is, and I can't stress this enough, basically utilizing a resource like us to be able to sit down with you and put together a solution to make sure that, again, it fits what you're looking to do and you're not just going out there buying the newest flavor of Sassy or whatever have you. Just making sure that, the research is done. And again, because we're going to see a lot more providers actually providing. And again, right now, it's not a one size fits all and they're not all offering it the same way. But I'm absolutely excited about the technology itself and where we're going with it for sure.
Yeah, and with that said, to that point, I think that I love whiteboarding with everybody that we're talking to today. So whether we do it in person or we do a virtual whiteboard, while you're seeing a lot of typical use cases that we're bringing to the table, I'd love to make it specific for you. So if you think it's something you're interested in doing, just reach out to your account rep and we'll set up a time to be able to make that happen for you. So you have something that's tailored exactly for what you need.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Larry and Jason, and thank you everyone who is on the call and who joined us for our first episode of Live with Larry. Please be sure to join us. This is our bi-weekly series. So we will be back on, on September 3rd. So I'll share everyone the links and an email. And if you have any questions about Sassy or how Bird Rock Systems, Jason Morris at Planet One, and how we can help you, please be sure to reach out to us and we can set something up. So thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of your Thursday.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.